Being attuned to others' needs and their expectations is a great thing, but sometimes we're working so hard to meet or exceed those expectations that it becomes to our own detriment. And we've all heard the phrase that you want to fill your cup first and serve from the overflow. When you're living as an overachiever, you're not living from your overflow. You're constantly pouring into someone else's cup, meeting someone else's expectations, proving to other people to the detriment of yourself. Welcome to another episode of Living Room Wisdom, where your story is your glory. Today, we're going to dive into a conversation about the lie of more equals better and how that might actually be robbing you of your peace, of your abundance, of your fulfillment, happiness in general, to be honest. So, like you, I wear many hats. I've always worn many hats, and I have a tendency to be an overachiever, much like you, which is why you're here. For a long time, I wore that overachiever archetype almost like a badge of honor, right? It validated me. It was who I am or who I thought I was. But when I really sit with myself and I'm living from a space of full authenticity, who I really am is a divine disruptor of the status quo. So, what that means is that I had always been raised to be a good girl. And at a certain point, I said, screw that. That's not me. I don't necessarily resonate fully with what that good girl archetype demands of me. And I broke free from it and kind of went the opposite direction and rebelled a little bit and decided I was going to do whatever the fuck I wanted to do, right? But as we mature and as we evolve, we find a middle ground that feels resonant, that feels aligned, and that really is true to ourselves, but also honoring of what we're here to be. Okay. So if I had to put it into just a short phrase as far as who I am in the world, I'm a woman who was born to elevate consciousness, liberate leaders, right? Help them to become embodied leaders, embodied women, and also to awaken the world in a way that helps them to live in a more abundant, playful, and peaceful way. Okay, so let's talk about how I do this. Obviously, I do this by guiding you through the Anatomy of Abundance framework, which is in the book. So I'm not going to go into super deep detail about that today. If you've watched the other episodes, you already have kind of a grasp of what the Anatomy of Abundance framework is. What I really want to do in this episode is I want to make this about you. Some of you might be functioning in the archetype of the overachiever and not even realizing what it's doing to yourself. Okay. So let's talk about that overachiever archetype. The first sign that you are functioning as an overachiever is that you have a relentless drive to succeed, which in itself is actually a pretty positive thing, but it gets distorted, right? You become obsessed with checking all the boxes and exceeding the expectations of others, not just meeting them, but exceeding them. Slowing down actually starts to feel like failure or like you're falling behind, right? And that creates stress and also a negative self-talk. Achievement not doesn't bring a fulfillment, right? If it does, it's a very short-lived, but it's really more about proving your worth, right? So all of your achievements, they're one after another. You're hitting these markers, you're achieving these things, you're making people proud. But inside, it's a trap because it puts you in a position to constantly have to reach the next goal or do the next thing so that you feel validated and worthy. Okay. So essentially, what happens is that your identity becomes tied to those achievements. Your self-worth becomes measured by productivity and titles and income levels and accolades from other people rather than being cultivated intrinsically. If you're not achieving, you may start to feel invisible, or even unworthy. You often struggle to separate who you are from what you do. Okay. I know some of you are like, ouch, why are you calling me out, Patrina? Yeah. Self-identifying a bit. This is good. This is awareness, right? This is the first step of the anatomy of abundance framework is aware. It's bringing awareness. It's really reconnecting you to the truth of who you are. And you'll know in your body because as I'm speaking, your body will give you signs. Maybe you'll tighten up a little bit in the shoulders. Maybe you'll feel like a little tinge in your stomach, right? Your body will tell you what's true and what's not true if you pause to listen. Okay. So let's keep going. High standards, perfectionism in disguise. High standards, again, it's a wonderful thing to have high standards, but not when it actually prevents you from getting what you really want. And that is the case a lot of times. So you hold yourself and others to near impossible standards, right? Near impossible, which means that you're actually setting yourself up for failure because nothing ever meets the mark, right? Mistakes, unfortunately, are seen as failures, not as growth, right? Not as a journey, not as opportunities. And the truth is, most of us learn and evolve from our failures, right? It's not about how successful you are or, all of that. It's really about how many times you could fall down, how many times you can fail, how many times you can just completely screw things up and get back up, recreate, and still shine. That's really what success is. And so you also might have a tendency to resist or feel very, very uncomfortable about celebrating your own wins. And the reason is because you're never satisfied, right? You're like, yep, I did that. And you just kind of keep on going. You don't acknowledge, you don't celebrate your successes. You just feel like on to the next thing, right? But when you do that, you rob yourself of presence. You rob yourself of that reassurance that right now you might be looking externally to receive, but it's actually something that we can give to ourselves, right? Something we should be giving to ourselves, right? So all of this is really driven by a deep fear. And I know we don't really always want to accept and acknowledge our fears, but it's really an unconscious fear of disappointment, right? An unconscious fear of judgment from others. A lot of times, maybe family, maybe friends, people that we really want to make proud. And we may tend from that fear to start people pleasing, overperforming, right? Or even hiding, avoiding to be seen because we feel inadequate. We're very highly attuned with other people, which is a good thing, right? There seems like there's a lot of um, this is a great thing unless it crosses over too, right? So being attuned to others' needs and their expectations is a great thing, but sometimes we're working so hard to meet or exceed those expectations that it becomes to our own detriment. And we've all heard the phrase that you want to fill your cup first and serve from the overflow. When you're living as an overachiever, you're not living from your overflow. You're constantly pouring into someone else's cup, meeting someone else's expectations, proving to other people to the detriment of yourself, right? Here's the biggest thing is that deep down, you actually dread being found out. Yeah. You're dreading that someone's actually gonna know that you have those fears, that you don't feel as confident as you're making it seem, that you're not as smart or as skilled or as um, charismatic as some of the other people in the room. And oftentimes, this is identified or called imposter syndrome. I don't know that I necessarily believe in imposter syndrome, but I do know that we've all had those experiences of feeling like we're going to be found out. And that's essentially a core wound of shame, right? Something that we don't want to expose about ourselves. And so overachievers are often overcompensating for fear of being found out. So now let's talk about confidence, right? Great segue. Outward confidence often becomes inner exhaustion because we're performing, right? We're all about the hustle instead of harmony. And to be in that hustle, we're constantly performing, proving, going, even when our body is telling us to stop, right? We appear poised, we appear confident on the outside, but internally, you might be experiencing some anxiousness, some overwhelm, secretly craving permission to just pause. I did an entire episode for this podcast about the pause, the sacred pause that I took for about 10 months. And so for you, if you're still stuck in that overachiever loop, you might be afraid, right? Afraid to pause, wondering if everything's going to fall apart, but secretly you're craving for that. And only you can give yourself permission to pause. So often what happens is that you end up suppressing your emotions to maintain suppressing your emotions to maintain control or appear that you're stronger than you really are, right? Because heaven forbid somebody actually thinks that you're weak. And because you're maintaining this facade, this mask of being strong, you create a prison for yourself. You create a situation where you have difficulty asking for help, but you also have difficulty receiving support. And what happens when you block your ability to ask and receive is that nothing can get in and nothing can get out. This is how we block our abundance. So if you don't do it, it won't get done right. Have you ever had that thought? If you have, then you're blocking your abundance. A lot of successful people, the thing that makes them successful is that they realize that they're not building that success alone. They have a team, they're collaborating, right? There's collective energies coming together to support the vision that they're looking to bring into the world. So if you have this mindset of if I don't do it, it won't get done or it won't get done right, then you really want to sit with yourself and reassess, like, where has that gotten you? How is that working for you so far, right? I definitely used to have that. I would not let go of control for anything because I had the same thing, if I don't do it, it's not going to get done right. And I proved myself wrong. I learned that I can create more leverage, more support, more money, more time, more joy, more freedom, and more impact by hiring or aligning with people that are even more skilled, even more dynamic, even more talented than me. So when you're in that overachiever role, though, you equate independence with strength, and you may avoid vulnerability. I know I struggled with vulnerability for a long time, and I have clients who struggle with vulnerability. I think that one of the things that makes me so qualified to support our archetype is that I'm a recovered overachiever, recovered slash recovering, because of course sometimes it wants to come back up, and I have to silence that overachiever and step back into my full embodiment. But that's why people come to me for support, is because I create that sacred space and I can actually guide them in reframing and realigning in a way that feels authentic, where they still get the results and they can still feel validated and worthy, but without killing themselves, without overextending and without giving more than they have to give, right? So if you have a hard time receiving, it could be receiving compliments, it could be receiving love, it could be you have a hard time receiving money, right? People are like, oh, here, take this. I want to bless you. And you're, oh, no, no, no. Then you are caught up in the overachieving loop, and it might be something to take a look at. So, overachieving people are also very spiritually curious, but often disconnected from themselves, disconnected from source, spirit, God, whatever you want to call it, right? You might be feeling the nudge to do more soul work, but you just haven't prioritized it because your schedule is like this. So you end up having success without fulfillment. And there's something inside of you that's whispering, there must be more than this. I've done the things, I've met the goals, I've created this beautiful life that looks so wonderful from the outside looking in. But inside, something is still wondering, is this it? So you're craving more alignment, right? But you feel guilty about choosing yourself or choosing stillness. Let me ask you a question. Uh, you've mastered the doing. Are you ready to start mastering being, right? Living and creating your life from embodied abundance? True expansion feels nourishing, not depleting. So stop buying the lie that more equals better because it doesn't, right? What I want you to do is I'd love for you to just grab a pen and paper real quick. I want you to have something to walk away with in this episode. And I want you to ask yourself two questions. The first question is, where am I performing instead of leading from purpose? Okay. Where am I performing instead of leading from purpose? Got that? All right. Then the second question I want you to ask yourself is, where have I brought into hustle as the only way? Where have I bought into the hustle as if it's the only way? Okay. Because it's not. There's so many adjustments, tweaks, refinements that can be made in your life that will create more ease, more joy, more success, more wealth, more connection, all of the things that you actually are desiring in your life. So today, you took the first step by listening to this episode. You paused to acknowledge the pattern. You honored your awareness, right? And that alone is a powerful act of reclamation. But if you're ready to reclaim your true identity beyond the roles, beyond the titles, beyond the expectations, if you're ready to really rewrite or reframe what success actually means on your terms, right? And if you're ready to rewrite the narratives that no longer serve your becoming or the season that you're in or the woman that you're meant to be, then your next step is very clear. Okay? I want you to go down into the show notes. I want you to download your free guide, Win Back Your Time Without Losing Your Mind. And then I want you to consider joining us in our private podcast. This is an exclusive and very sacred space for deep dives like this started. Wasn't as deep. This was just a introduction. But that space is designed to be a deep dive with high touch, high support, and real transformation. And you'll be in a container alongside other high achieving, high producing, overachieving, well, recovering overachieving women. So they get you, they see you, they understand you, and together we will rewrite the narratives and not have to do it alone, right? Test your edge. Let's shift from survival to thriving and let's do it together. So I hope that you got something from this episode, a little nudge, a little tweak, a little, right? That brought you into an awareness of where you could be amplifying your joy, amplifying your purpose, amplifying your ability to fully express and embody who the hell you are. All right. So, with that, I just want to thank you for tuning into this episode of Living Room Wisdom. Go ahead and follow us on Instagram, Patrina Wisdom and Living Room Wisdom. Don't forget to get your free download, and we'll see you next week right here at Living Room Wisdom, where your story is your glory.